What's the word, y'all? Can we just talk about how Oda took 28 years? 28 real life years and counting for this man's backstory to be explained. This man shows up in the first chapter of One Piece, lost his arm, and gave his hat to some 7-year-old and disappeared and never to be seen again. It's crazy to think that Shanks is seen as a franchise icon, but struggles to appear in back-to-back chapters. In a series with 1,000 chapters, Shanks only appeared back-to-back once. I mean, that was expected because he was a cameo in his own movie. But again, people, we are in Elbaf, okay? Spoilers for chapter 1152, by the way. So if you don't want to get spoiled, you better catch up. Next thing you know, a couple more arcs, by the year 2050, it's over. And we still don't have an explanation on Shanks. But I think I managed to gather just a glimpse, as a Filipino boy who's living in a different country. I think I gathered the most information that I can, from theory sites, from manga evidence, SBS, tiny dose of fan fiction from my side, like that can get me canceled with the One Piece community, just a little bit. So subscribe, like the video, I don't really care, just support small creators. Before we accurately guess Shank's backstory, let's figure out where this backstory takes place first. I assume, and based on all the evidence, his backstory will focus on the time where he was in Marijua, which was ARE, after Roger execution. I don't think we'll get a lot of scenes from BRE, before Roger execution. Maybe bits of it like Roger giving his hat to Shanks, but I just think we'll get the bulk of it after Roger's execution, when Shanks was in Marijua. But quickly, let's talk about during Roger's execution. Before Roger ever got to the platform in Logtown, we assume that he's held in a jail cell somewhere. We know from Garp's flashback, he talked to Roger in a jail cell. We don't know, is that in Logtown or he was transported to Logtown? Maybe he was impelled down for a time, just a theory. So here's my theory. I'm guessing Shanks went up to Roger's cell just to talk to him, like, oh, why are you doing this? Why are you giving yourself up? Roger was like a father figure to Shanks. Roger talks to Shanks, before his execution. Maybe something important, maybe something not, like, yeah, I'm gonna die. Sorry. But we know, and that's, again, this is just a theory. We know that whatever Roger told him made him not go after the One Piece. Whatever Roger told him can allude to many different things, like the will of D, Joy Boy's prophecy, and something about Shanks not being who Roger thought he was, because maybe he gave some thought like, oh, you not part of the will of D, you out of here. You're not the chosen child, by the way. Sorry. He spent some time thinking, lovemaking. He was like, oh, maybe I gave the wrong kid the chance. So obviously he drops this bombshell to Shanks. Maybe also told him about where he came from, oh, your real family is in Marijua. You're actually a celestial dragon. By the way, you're not the chosen child. Okay, maybe that's not how it actually went. Maybe Roger told him before that, oh yeah, your father, your real family, we found you in a treasure chest. You were actually Garling's child. My theory is that Roger told him something that made him not go after the One Piece, put it aside for a while. Anyways, obviously he was heartbroken, but he still watches his captain died. He was like a father figure to him, and he vows oh, maybe I shouldn't go after the One Piece. For now, I just want to be a carefree pirate with Buggy. He asks Buggy to join the crew. Buggy D-Clan refuses. He just leaves Shanks all alone off to the sea. Alone, familyless. The only family he knows was the Roger Pirates. His friend was Buggy. He's alone now. But he knew he had one place that he knew had family. That Roger told him that he had a father there and maybe a brother and maybe a sister. So we're gonna take this halftime break just to assess what we got. Shanks is going to Marijua because Roger told him his dad is there. Maybe he wants to confront his father about why he put him in a treasure chest in God Valley. Oda has always done backstories to explain major, huge plot relevance in the story. So for the case of Kuma, it was God Valley. For the case of Kaido, it was the Lunarians. For the case of Big Mom, it was Elbaf's roots. For Robin, it was Ohara. So what will this backstory give us exactly? I think Shank's backstory will focus on how people become God's Knights, how people can leave the God's Knights, and how Imu rules Marijua behind the scenes. Now, notice I said how people become God's Knights. How is that supposed to be relevant to Shanks? I think the reason why Shanks was in Marijua, he was trained to be a God Knight in Marijua. Going back to my theory that Shanks went to Marijua looking for answers and stayed there for whatever reason and trained to be a God Knight with his whole family. Like, you can say, oh, Seraphim, how can Shanks, someone who is a member of the King of the Pirates crew, just stroll back in Marijua like nothing happened? We know that Buggy wasn't really reported as like the King of the Pirates crew, so we can't exactly say that Shanks was very well known. But I also think it's not that complicated, because let's say I'm a celestial dragon, okay? I'm not, by the way. But let's say I am, and you saw the commander of the God's Knights say like, oh, by the way guys, this is my son who had just come back after the King of the Pirates. Our enemy kidnapped him when he was a little tiny baby and forced him to be a cabin boy in his crew. Propaganda, people. If you're a celestial dragon, would you really question Garling? He's practically like a hero of the Marines for them. The hero of the celestial dragons. So Garling welcomes his son, Shanks. He meets his brother, Shamrock, and meets his sister, Sasha. And they're all the Finger family. But other than that, I do think Shanks was a God Knight there. I think that's confirmed fact. We did saw his mysterious tattoo in chapter 1152. We assume that it's an abyss mark, I guess. But, because practically all the God's Knights have some sort of abyss mark. So as a God Knight, he must known about Imu. Maybe he trained alongside, his brother and the rest of the Celestial Dragons. And our good old friend, maybe Mihawk? Again, that's a theory. Anyways, Shanks being a God Knight, he sees how life is in Marijua. He sees how the Celestial Dragons act. He goes, on many missions, for the glory of the world government. And Imu says like, oh, just kill people. I don't really care. And maybe Imu's like, oh, I'm gonna send all the God's Knights to kill all the D people. The will of D. And here's where another canon part happens. I'm gonna fill out these things with canon parts. He goes on a mission to kill one of the Will of D members and Whitebeard's crew. Goes on a mission to kill Blackbeard. Blackbeard gives him that scar. And that's crazy, okay? Because we know that God's Knights have a regenerative ability. So how did Blackbeard, maybe he's the same age as Shanks, but like what? It's like 20 or something like that. Like 25, I don't care. That's crazy to think that Blackbeard had advanced Conqueror's Haki. He managed to hurt a God Knight, permanently scarred him. So to think that Blackbeard had that power that early on, it's kind of crazy, Whitebeard did not notice that. Like, bro, Luffy noticed Zoro had advanced Conqueror's Haki. Whitebeard is like, oh, I'm gonna just leave this kid alone. I don't really care. And that's why he's dead. Again, some times pass, and Shanks learns the ugly truth in the world. The Void Century, the ancient weapons, the Celestial Dragons, slave trade. All these stuff is what ultimately made him leave. Now, of course, Imu would notice like, oh, why is this motherfucker leaving? All the other God's Knights would oppose, probably Garling as well and Shamrock. And we know the Abyss Mark would control anyone who disobeys Imu. But with how Shanks tattoo, differs from all the other God's Knights we saw, we can assume that it might be like a broken abyss mark. Maybe he broke it off with Haki and like he's free from Imu's control, but he still has the reminder. So maybe Shanks does leave, maybe after fighting Shamrock or Garling. Maybe he also frees Mihawk, okay? By the way, people, do not search Mihawk naked. It will lead you to a site that you don't want to see. Or maybe you want to see, okay? Maybe search it, okay? Years pass, the events of chapter 1152 occurs, we know someone stole a very powerful devil fruit. We know that was like a year apart where Shanks meets Luffy. So I think the devil evil fruit, I don't know, disappeared, using the abyss somehow in the East Blue. Maybe that's why Shanks stayed in the East Blue for a year. Build his crew there just to find the legendary fruit, the Gamu Gamu no Mi. We can theorize in another video like what he would have done with the fruit. Would have he eaten it? Despite not being part of the Will of D, does he know the significance of the Gamu Gamu no Mi? Why was he stationed in Fuchsia Village? Was he gonna give the fruit to Ace, or was he gonna return it to Elbaf? And again, when he met Luffy, a member of the Will of D, someone who shares the same dream as his captain, Shanks bets on him. Not necessarily, gave him the fruit. Maybe Shanks just had this vibe around Luffy, where he thought Luffy could be the one. Sorry, Roger, I'm not gonna give the fruit to your son. He's a rat. I'm betting everything on this kid. That's why I lost my left arm. Maybe it wasn't an accident at all. Maybe Shanks losing his arm, he wants to lose his arm. He doesn't want a reminder of years of torment from Imu and the world government. Joy Boy, the god of liberation, the fruit, already working the magic, setting people free like Shanks. So that's why Shanks gave him his hat. He's like, oh, you're the rightful wearer of it, saying you're the man Roger was waiting for. And scene. And I will never appear in a chapter again. Now, this backstory is a lot, but I think this will cover a lot of areas, practically loose ends, like, oh, Shanks' visit to Marijua, maybe Mihawk versus Shanks. How can people become God's Knights? Shanks' motivation on guiding Luffy from the start. But I think ultimately Oda decides to drop this all in the final arc. Maybe after Shanks' death, that would be fitting, like, oh, I'm gonna give this important backstory after Shanks died. Sorry. Again, I don't want to jinx it. Maybe a happy ending. Everyone is happy. Then Buggy joins the crew and like flexes his fucking fist or something. Cause ain't that all what Shanks wanted? Just, live a life with his gay friend Buggy, the clown. Who knows? Again, support small creators like me. I love you guys. Real ones say it back.